Okay, Lexi, we're looking at lesson 67, number 23. If you'll look at the diagram and maybe jot that down on your paper so maybe you can take some notes along with this, or if you want to watch the whole video first so you can follow what's going on and then go back and fill it in, however you want to do it. Sometimes these proofs get a little bit complicated, so it's probably ideal that you might watch me go through it first. Try to follow along with that rather than trying to be distracted by taking the notes down along with me. So how about if you just watch with me now, and let's take a look at what we have. So looks like we have a triangle. The triangle is ACE, the big one, looking at the big triangle all the way around. We are told that B, point B, so try to, look for that point with your eyes. Oops. B is the midpoint of AC, and B is right here. So it's the midpoint of this line, AC, which means it's right smack in the middle. So we know what happens there. That means we're going to have two equal line segments here, right? We're going to use that in a little bit of a different way in just a moment. We're also told that D over on the other side is the midpoint of EC. So again, that's going to make two congruent line segments here as well, right? Because that's what a midpoint does. It divides it right in the middle. We are also told that the measure of angle E, right up here, is greater than A. So E is a larger angle than A, so I'm going to draw it like that, so E looks larger. In fact, maybe I'll even just go ahead and color that in yellow. So E is a bigger angle than A, and to really top that off, I'm going to write on the inside that this is a bigger angle than this one. So this one's the small one. Okay, so we have a bigger angle and a small one. And you remember the rule about that. We can always find the bigger side based on what the bigger angle is. So we have two angles we're comparing here. One's bigger, one's smaller. So the opposite sides will also act accordingly. So this side over here is going to be your bigger side, and this side over here is going to be your smaller side. Okay, so I'm sure we're going to use that somewhere in this little puzzle. So let's see what we have here. So step one, B is the midpoint of AC, and D is the midpoint of CE. That is simply given information. So we'll write that in there. Also, that midpoint created, remember how I said that the midpoint, and you know this, that the midpoint here is dividing that line segment AC in half. That midpoint B is right here, I'm having trouble with my app here. Hold on. Okay, B is the midpoint of AC. Excuse me. Which means that A is half the measure of that entire line segment. We're going to write that in and then we'll discuss it. And also on the other side, ED over here, this line segment right here, is half the size of this whole thing, which that makes sense because that midpoint cut in half. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill that in. So AB is half AC and ED is half CE. And that is simply the definition of a midpoint. That's what a midpoint does, cuts it in half. Okay? Now, number 3, we're going to go ahead and put down that given information about those angles that we wrote up there, the bigger angle and the smaller angle. So the measure of angle E is greater than the measure of angle A, given information. And by the way, step number 2, we're going to use that again in just a little bit. It was important that we mention it and get it into the proof so that we can use it and utilize it somehow else later on. Okay, now step 4 says that AC is greater than CE, and there we go. We've already talked about that. Because of this bigger angle E, the side opposite will be bigger than the side opposite its smaller angle. So that's what step 4 says. It says that AB is your bigger side and EC is your smaller side. And that's basically what step 4 is saying. And we know the reason for that is just if unequal angles, then unequal sides. So we'll fill that in here. I'm going to abbreviate angles, then unequal sides. Okay, now let me erase some things out of here just to get them out of the way. All right, now let's look at step number 5, half AC. Okay, so if we know AC is larger than CE, well, then it would stand to reason that half of AC would be larger than half of CE, right? That would be like, let's say we had a piece of string and it's this long and I cut it in half right there. And then I have a piece of string that's this long and I cut it in half. Well, you can tell that the halves on each one of those, a half from this piece of string is going to be larger than a half of this piece of string. And that's all that says in step number 5. Okay, so let me erase some of the stuff that doesn't need to be here. Okay, and simply the reason for that in number 5 is that's the multiplication property of inequality that you see there. So we have an inequality, that's what that is. It's not an equal sign, it's an inequality sign, greater than. And we're multiplying here with the 1/2, right? This is a multiplication of 1/2 that's happening here. Okay, so that's all that is saying. Okay, multiplication property of inequality. And that brings us to our last step. So think about this. Remember I said we're going to bring number 2. We had to, we're kind of restating number 2 down here. Let me see here. Well, that's not really true. We're not restating it. So I'm going to change my wording there, but we needed that in order to write 5 down here. So that helped us in the process of those 2 steps. Anyway, don't worry too much about that. That's not really that important. But this is. So what I'm going to do here in number 6 is I'm going to use the substitution property. Let me show you how. So what is half AC? Let's go find it. Half of AC and I'm going to actually take pink here. Actually, I'm going to take my pink pencil, and I'm going to show you half of AC is AB, right? AC is the whole thing. If my pink line keeps going, that's AC. So AB is half of AC, and what's half of CE? Half of CE is ED. So look, I can just, instead of writing half of AC, in step 6, I'm going to call half of AC, AB. And in number 6, I'm going to call half of CE, ED. Okay, so that is just substituting because I'm just calling the same thing by 2 different names. Okay, and that is actually what we were trying to prove, was that AB was bigger than ED. And actually when you cut the string in half, you could see that taking place. But all these other steps were necessary to state in order to get to that final proof statement. Okay, I know these can be confusing. Just do the best you can at seeing why things are as they are. Okay, listing them in order or listing them at all is the hardest part, but seeing what's taking place is very valuable. And I think at least if you can draw out what is here and write it in, I think that's helpful. Okay, Lexi, we have one more to go. I'll send this one your way.